Welcome back to the Beyond Broadcast podcast, a show which takes a behind-the-scenes look at industry professionals and their lives working in the broadcasting and entertainment industry. Today, I'm speaking with Ruth Sullivan, a Foley artist and performer whose work has helped shape the sound of hundreds of films, TV, dramas, and live theatre productions. Originally trained as a performer, specifically a dancer, Ruth began her career at Shepperton Studios in the mid-90s and has since worked on projects including Killing Eve, Bodyguard, War of the Worlds, and Mamma Mia. She's also become the go-to Foley artist for live theatre sound, performing on stages across the UK and Europe. Welcome to the show, Ruth.
Thank you very much, Jamie. It's lovely to be here.
It's lovely to have you here, and I think the thing I always love is doing this background, doing the research and learning more about people such as yourself. And I guess the good starting point, which is something we talked briefly off air about, was the fact that, you originally trained as a performer, specifically an actor. And I think this is where I really want to dip into this, is at what point did you realize acting might not be the whole picture for you or the career that you really wanted to go down?
Before I start, Jamie, I have to say I'm still waiting to be discovered. I still think that Hollywood is in my future. But apart from that, I think that basically when I was I'd finished training, I'd moved to London, I was trying to get work as a dancer and an actor, and it was just so hard. And I was trying to be sensible. I was trying to think of other things that I could do. And literally, I mean, this is no word of a lie, I sent off my final CV to the job that I found advertised in the back of the stage. And I said, if this job doesn't come through, I'm going to change career. I'm going to try and do something in an office, something practical that could actually earn me some money. And then this woman called me up and said, well, we don't actually need dancers for film work, because that was the advert, dancers wanted for film work, but we do train dancers to do something called Foley. And I must admit, I'd never heard of Foley before. I'd never considered it as a career. And certainly for the first few years, I still didn't consider it as a career. It was just the thing that I did in order to subsidize the other projects that I had. I think it was probably about 10 years in that I thought, hang on a second, this is really cool. This is what I want to do. And I have been fortunate, as you know, to combine the Foley work that I do with the theatre work, which was always my dream. So, I think I've been very lucky to be able to mix the two strands of my performing and film lives.
Do you feel like elements of that training at Arts Ed, and obviously when you were studying for your degree, do you feel like that kind of played a pretty early part in what became your career in Foley? Or do you think it kind of became a little bit later when you did start obviously training and being on set and being a part of that industry? Was there elements of sound and movement kind of already playing a pretty crucial part in that kind of early stage?
I think so, actually. I think I've always been aware of sound, and even from a very early age, sort of cantering around the garden as a 6-year-old thinking, oh, that bit of ground sounds different from that piece. And I think I always loved tap dance, and tap is very rhythmical. There's always, it's all about sound, dynamics in sound. And I always knew that Fred Astaire was not wearing tap shoes when he started to dance in the film. So I knew somehow instinctively that there was an element of additional sound that was needed for film. I think as well that one of the things that I came to realize is that Foley is a performance. And you have to not only embody the actors that you're performing footsteps for, but you really have to perform literally in a studio. There's a recordist. The first job that I did, there were about 5 different people in the studio, and so you really are. You have to sometimes pretend that you know what you're doing and just hope that the sounds come out right. I think that there's so much about my training that kind of fits in with Foley, but perhaps I didn't realize initially.
And this is more of a UK-centric thing because you're not originally from London. So what was it that drew you to moving to London to get into the industry? Because now when I look at the UK kind of industry, it's not as London focused as what it necessarily used to be. There's a lot more hubs around the UK, but was London really the place that you had to be if you wanted to be in the industry, especially acting? Or was it like kind of a dream of yours to kind of move to the big smoke and kind of realize the dream?
Yeah, all of the above, really. I always knew that I would move to London because that was where you had to be to become an actress. That was it. So I feel as though I didn't even make that decision. The decision had been made. It was just that was where I was going to be. And so now whenever I think about where I might move to in another part of my life or whatever, I don't know. I literally don't know. London is just the place where I knew I had to end up in order to pursue a career. But I have been lucky to be able to go to some other places as well, which has been really nice. Yeah, I think it is still tricky to be in other parts of the UK. I think London, it is, the studios that I go to in and around London, I can travel to from where I live, but I might not be able to if I lived somewhere else. So, yeah. But maybe I'm just saying that so that I don't have to move out of London. I'm not sure.
It is a pretty incredible place for sure. And do you think it kind of attracts a certain type of people as well? During my time living in London, I felt like there was creativity oozing from every part of it, from every sort of neighborhood. You'd run into someone who was kind of going for that same dream or that same path of like, I'm in a creative industry. Do you feel like that played a big part as well of like your early time in London was like being and surrounding yourself with other creatives kind of following the same dream?
Yeah, actually, that's a really good question. If I think about it now, I was living with my sister. She was doing a PhD, but she was also based at a university that had a really incredible dance and theatre society set up. So I got to perform and choreograph with her on stage at the Bloomsbury Theatre, which is an amazing theatre. We had friends who were in bands. We went to see bands all the time, just small gigs in small pub gig spaces. I got together with a friend and we put on our own gig nights. You know, we tried to support all our friends in bands and everything. I mean, it was such a hive of activity. That was in the mid to late 90s. Yeah. I set up my own dance company because if you wanted to do something, you just went out and did it. You didn't have the money to do it, but you still did it. Somehow or other, we managed to cobble together some cash and find somewhere cheap to perform. But yeah, it was a very exciting time. And I'm not saying that it isn't possible now to do that or that people don't have that drive, but certainly that's what I remember of the 90s. Yeah, definitely.
100% that kind of like independent DIY, kind of do-it-yourself sort of almost punkish attitude that people took to the creative industries in London. I think that was something I always heard echoed in every hallway, every studio was literally that. Most people were just self-taught or kind of picked it up as they went and kind of figured it out later. And in that respect, it's kind of reflective of that first Foley job that you ended up getting, which, as I mentioned in your intro, was a half-day at Shepperton Studios on Soldier, which was back in 1996. An incredibly iconic show, had quite a few seasons. Like, the classic question is, what do you remember most about that first day, apart from maybe the potential anxiety, like nervousness? Like, what was that first day on set like?
It was terrifying. I mean, Shepperton was at the time one of the biggest studios, literally the biggest recording theatre for Foley. And there was a massive movie screen in front of me, and the woman who was my mentor pointed at one of the actors on the screen and said, right, now you're following them, you've got to jump out of that aeroplane. And I honestly don't know if I was watching the right person, but I just sort of did what I thought I was meant to do. My heart was racing. It was a big deal. It was really a big deal for me. I'll never forget it. And also just finding the studio. You know, I often think this now. We have Google Maps or whatever you use in your car, and you can just get somewhere really easily. But at the time, I had this long list of written, scribbled instructions, which road to turn down and turn left at the pub and go 100 meters this way. I mean, it was a mission just to get there. So yeah, I can remember that, knowing which door to open and what the red light meant. And oh God, yeah. I can feel my heart palpitating now.
And I like how you use a pub as a waypoint. I feel like that became a very big commonality for me trying to locate myself in anywhere in Soho. I was like, okay, the King's Arms something. Okay, the faltering horse. Yep, perfect. I know where I am. I can locate myself.
Yeah. You can always orientate yourself by the pubs.
Exactly. Great waypoint. And I guess in that first learning experience where you're like, okay, I'm jumping out of an airplane in this scene, did it even kind of come to terms like in your own mind, like, how is this going to translate into the sound that's going to be on the screen? Was there kind of that thought process going in your mind being like, this can't be what they're using to put onto screen? Was there that moment, or at every point you're like, I can already kind of hear it and see it from the movement itself?
I probably was too scared to even have any thoughts of that nature on that particular day. But what was really good about that theatre setup in Shepperton was they, generally speaking, they would take time and spend time and replay the tracks that we'd recorded, even though it was, in inverted commas, just a telly job and not a big feature film. The wonderful engineer, Ed Collier, would play back all the tracks. And so you could really see and hear what you had achieved in a scene and where everything fitted in. So that was a really, really good learning experience for me, I would say.
So you're already kind of getting an idea of like the rhythmic nature of the sound, like this is how the fall should sound, or the jump out of the helicopter, it should hit in these moments. This is how it needs to kind of have that sort of pace. And was that what you meant by like the whole idea of like listening back to the audio and being like, okay, we need to have it like 1/2 second earlier, this particular hit, so it sounds like someone is hitting the grass, for example?
Yes, exactly. And I think probably back then we definitely weren't recording digitally. We'd have been recording onto tape. So you had to be in sync. It was really, really important to be in sync because people weren't going to cut the tape just to get your silly little sound effect in the right place. So yeah, that was really drummed into me when I was training. And it was a very informal training, nothing like going to university or whatever, just little half days in my mentor's living room, like learning how to walk in time with the actors. But yes, so sync was so important. But a place like Shepperton, they wouldn't rush through a session. It was like, yes, okay, we need to listen to this. We need to play the tracks back, see what's missing, see what we need to fit in. Nowadays, we don't have that opportunity so much if we're working very quickly on a TV drama. But I suppose the difference now is that I'm much more experienced, so I kind of know whether something's going to work or not, perhaps without listening to it all. But I do like, sorry, I'm jumping around a little bit here because I'm just thinking if I've done a sound effect and a few tracks of different sounds, then I do like to ask, can I hear that? Can I see what's missing? Can I add something to that? So yeah, it's just that it isn't done as a matter of course nowadays.
And kind of rewinding to what you said as well, it could also be a case of cost. Like when you have production costs that high and you're recording to tape, there perhaps is a bit more care taken because they're like, okay, this isn't digital. We can't just rewrite that and then go back and do it again. It's like literally a case of like, we need this to be perfect.
Exactly.
I find that really interesting. And
and we'd only have 8 tracks. Excuse me, we'd only have 8 tracks maximum. So everything had to fit into those 8 tracks. And nowadays, of course, it's like, well, how many tracks can I have? You know, it's 100, it's however many. I mean, you don't want 100 tracks, that would be ludicrous. But you know, you don't have to limit yourself. You can nowadays, but then everything was much more economical.
Definitely. And a lot of your early work was basically observing sessions before you were like being thrown into the mix completely. So you did kind of have that ability to learn on the job quite ad hoc. What was the experience like just watching an experienced Foley artist at work? Was it quite strange for you, like trying to get into the mind of a Foley artist and kind of have that like kind of theatre of the mind, imagining how the sounds sound properly? Or was it kind of like it was a sit and learn, more or less, rather than like you started to get that understanding yourself?
It's quite weird watching a Foley artist perform. whether or not you're trying to learn to be one, it is just a very, very weird thing. I mean, we look ridiculous when we're running on the spot, trying to mimic whoever's running about on screen. But the other weird thing, and I experienced this when I was observing, and I know other people experience it when they're watching now, you think you can do better. And it's very humbling and important, actually, to realise that no, you can't. When you're actually up there doing the job, it is really difficult. And yes, it's easy to see when a footstep is out of sync. It's easy to see that when you're not the one performing it. But yeah, I guess that's the thing that perhaps you learn after a few sessions is, yes, you learn what you might do differently or something, but also to appreciate what somebody is physically doing and is able to do in that moment. And then how they can process what they need to improve for the next take. It's a very weird alchemy. I can't even really explain it.
It's a strange science, and in that respect as well, because of the fact you were learning on the job, and it was a lot of like viewing sessions and things like that. And you mentioned the fact there was no training at that point. There was no official university degree. Has that changed quite dramatically in the industry? Is there now proper like papers that people can do, or like courses that people now study specifically for the industry, or it still doesn't really exist? It's still considered quite a niche part of the sound industry.
There are definitely film courses that use or have Foley as a component on the course. They have studios in universities. Some of them are really well kitted out, I think. Some of them not so much. But people, I think, are a lot more aware of Foley generally. So, you know, I often go and do talks at colleges or what have you, and students are aware of Foley in a way that I never was. And people, you know, when I first started out, nobody knew what Foley was. Nowadays, I can tell somebody I'm a Foley artist, and generally speaking, they'll have a bit of an idea of what it is, but certainly not in the 90s. But yes, I think people are very interested. I'm not sure that I don't think you can go to college and learn to be a Foley artist. I don't think it's quite got to that stage. Probably no one would want to. But yeah, there's definitely many more opportunities for people to learn in a film course, within the film course, I would say.
And kind of going back to something we were discussing earlier, you've said before in interviews that movement plays a massive role in how sound feels. And do you feel like, for a Foley artist in particular, it's actually much more about the body itself and embodying the particular sound rather than the actual props that you're using? For example, I don't know, the sounding of footsteps. It's not necessarily about the material or the shoe that you're using. It's actually about the way that you're moving, the pressure that you're putting on. Is that kind of where the real sound comes from rather than the material necessarily?
I know I can absolutely see where you're coming from, and I think you're right. However, you do have to use the right materials as well. But there is a mix, definitely. And I was talking to somebody the other day, and which is why it's in my head, but somebody said to me a few years ago in a recording session, "Oh, I love watching Foley artists and what they do with their hands and how they manipulate the props." And I thought, oh, that's a bit... I don't know, that was a bit highfalutin or something. And then I realised that my hands do weird things and I don't know what they're doing. Sometimes I'll pick up a prop and I'll make a sound and it's just right, but I have no idea. I had no idea beforehand that that's what my hands were going to do. It is, again, the phrase I used earlier, it's a weird alchemy. It's very strange. And sometimes if you practice what you're going to do, it doesn't work. Sometimes you just need to find an object quickly and try something, and magic happens.
Kind of like a musician having a jam. When you overthink the music and overthink the structure, it ends up being a song that seems too kind of like sterile, whereas if you kind of let the freedom go, that's when you get the best moments.
I only play the ukulele quite badly, but yes, I do believe I know what you're talking about. Yeah. No, yeah, I mean, absolutely. You don't want things to be too
like
clinical.
rigid.
Yeah.
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 But
Yeah.
What are you talking about, Ruth? You can you can still shred on a ukulele. I feel like that is entirely possible.
You don't want to see me try. Thanks.
Well, you're a musician in a sense, because the well, we're talking about this as well, is theatre Foley is often described as more percussive more than anything else. And how do you think working live on Foley compared to obviously the situations that you find yourself in most respects, which is studio recording, very like structured, how do you think that changes the way that you approach it? Is it a little bit more percussive, like thinking at the particular moments of when this is going to happen? Is it kind of like that? Or am I overthinking it massively?
No, you're not. That's exactly right. Depending on the project, depending on the show, some of the timing can be absolutely crucial. Sometimes I'll be performing sound effects in direct relation to what a performer is doing, miming on stage. So they'll be miming an action and I have to do the sound for them. And if I'm out of sync with them, then that ruins the effect completely. So it is like a kind of percussion, I suppose. And I think one of the big projects that I work on is a production of The Magic Flute, and that I have to be quite musical with it as well, even though some of the sounds I'm making are not very musical at all. But I think that, again, it goes back to the way I was trained. We did dance and drama and music all day, and even though I'm not a musician, even with my bit of ukulele, I think that all of that background has lent itself to what I do on stage with the Foley. I can read music. That's helpful when you're working in opera. But yeah, I'd say because as a Foley artist, I have to, as we spoke earlier, you have to embody what the actors are doing. And when I'm performing live on stage, I have to feel what the actors or the singers are doing on stage as well, and try and use that Foley instinct, which is very difficult to teach, if not impossible, I would say. But yes, I've sort of talked myself round in a circle. I'm so sorry.
No, but I think it's a really good point, because it is something that kind of like, it's like musicians and creativity in that sense. It's instinctive. It's learned. It's from experience. It's not necessarily someone can read a book about it and then instantly be an expert. It comes from years of like watching and learning and being able to embody, as you said, different people, which I think is really, really cool. And moving into like another area, which I love the idea of this, is you've spoken in interviews about the fact that you are constantly collecting props, and this like I can't imagine what your house must look like, having like random like items just floating around your house. What would you say have become some of like the most classic kind of useful items that you've held on to that like are in your toolkit?
Well, the first thing that comes to mind is I have a very old Game Boy, which I don't think I ever really played, to be honest. I was very excited and bought it, I think must have been 23 years ago. And I use it for all sorts of things. I can match it with, I don't know, a metal mic stand and it becomes a rifle. I can literally use it and pick it up and it's a remote control. It's got the buttons, it's a real favourite prop. Other things, I mean, I really like old paper. I really like old things. And my dad was a hoarder, apparently, as we found out when he died 10 years ago. And he'd kept all of his college notes from the 60s, So I've got all this incredible paper, because paper in the old days sounds very different from paper that you would find now. So yeah, I love all of that because it's texture and it's it feels different and it sounds different, and it's an important distinction to make, I think. So I'm just looking around my flat now. I've got all sorts of bits and pieces. I've got a couple of old cameras. My mum used to make her own cine films, and I've got her little splicer machine. I've got lots of old books and leather suitcases and things.
I love
mean,
that.
it is for Foley. It is definitely for Foley.
Yeah, definitely for Foley.
That's why I've got, yeah.
It's in that respect as well, because you mentioned in another interview that toy shops can be a bit of a nice find for any Foley artist as well. Like, is it kind of weird, the idea that you walk into a toy shop, obviously being like, I'm thinking here, I'm spitballing, what is this going to be used for? What is that going to be used for? Is it kind of like the dream environment for you because you know that there's going to be some crazy sounds that you can pull from literally children's toys?
Well, yeah. I have to be careful though, because it would be very easy to just go around and just get loads of stuff, and then I would literally not be able to move in my flat. But if you're working on a particular project, then you've definitely got license to do that. And yeah, I was working on a production of A Midsummer Night's Dream up in Chester, and we needed to find a method. So it was an outdoor production, and we needed to find a method of literally throwing sound or giving the impression that sounds were moving from each side of the stage. And so, yeah, I was in the toy shop trying to find things that we could use that were colourful and noisy and all sorts of things. And yeah, that was great fun. And all of those things ended up in my props bag.
Stand by, and we're live. The Beyond Broadcast Podcast.
And one thing I love is the fact that some of the most, natural sounding materials actually end up being incredibly synthetic. Like, one of the things I loved watching was a video where you were going through how VHS tape sounds like falling leaves. Why is it that you think that sometimes the most unnatural things sound more real than the actual real object? For example, leaves can't always give the most accurate sound of crunching leaves, but a VHS tape, perfect, sounds great.
Yeah, that's really weird, isn't it? I don't have an answer for that. I just know maybe it's a textural thing, actually, because with videotape, it's one thing that all sounds the same. You get a bunch of videotape and sort of waft it around, and it sounds like leaves in trees in the breeze. But actual leaves, there are so many of types of them, and when they dry, they sound completely different to when they're fresh. And sometimes you don't need all of that variety, which is wrong, I know, but you just need something controllable or something that is instantly recognizable but won't become too transient in the recording or something like that.
Is it almost like playing to the idea of the commonality, being like, what would someone assume would be the sound of this? Is this kind of going back into the improv scenario where you're talking about sometimes the first sound is going to be the most accurate to what someone is going to think is what leaves sound like? And like you said, sometimes the VHS tape, because of the texture itself, it replicates it so well that you're like, it has to be leaves falling. It can't be anything else.
Yeah, and we've done that thing of tricking people into thinking that that's the right sound, so people expect it in film. That's a weird thing as well. Not altogether proud of that, but we do have certain sounds that we expect, like the sound of gravel. The tires through gravel, which is usually us with a trainer in a pit of gravel, but or gun rattles and swords. The sling of a sword. Sometimes I wince because we don't need them all the time, but it's like the audience expects it now. Yeah.
Because it was no, it was good because it was something that I asked my girlfriend before coming on to this interview, what's something that you would like me to ask Ruth? And she was like, I just want to know, how is it that you guys came up with the sounds of birds? Because once again, I watched a video of you discussing the idea of how bird sounds are made, and even I was like floored, being like, I thought these were all sounds that were recorded, and then I actually thought about it. I was like, how would you be able to get a bird to make a natural sound that actually replicates what it actually does? Of course, it's impossible. So that blew my mind. But how many different versions are there of bird calls or bird sounds? And what are the more common materials? The one that you showed in a video was wood rubbing together, which I thought was incredible because as soon as I heard it, I was like, oh my God, it's perfect.
Yeah, there are actually percussion instruments that are these little bird call things, which I don't tend to use for TV stuff really, but they're really great for theatre. sound effects, but also the sound of birds' wings. It's classic that we use a pair of gloves, but we might add a tie, a man's tie, so that there's a bit of softness in there as well. You can use feathers, but weirdly they don't sound right. It's so peculiar. I don't know why. And, I was walking a few years ago, I was walking down the road and I watched a pigeon fly off and I just went, oh yeah, that's a pair of gloves. It's the very strange surreality that we have going on in our heads.
Well, in terms of strange reality as well, or surrealness, I think one of the things I love is the fact that you worked on so many huge projects very early on in your career. Like, did it feel like quite a surreal jumping from, obviously, your original half-day part in the TV series to then working on some massive film productions? Was it weird for you? Were you just like, how am I even here at this point? Or was it just a reality of the industry? Because, I know that TV doesn't necessarily have the money all the time to pay for massive productions and sound departments, but in that respect, you literally had to go work on big films because that was where the budget was and where they really needed Foley more than anything. So was there a particular early project that you remember that you're like, how am I here at this moment?
I mean, I was really lucky, and it's important to point out, I think, that the little agency that I joined, the two women who ran that agency were really big in the Foley world, and they were getting a lot of big feature films. So, and because we used to partner up in those days, I would work as the sort of junior Foley artist with one of them. So it was pure luck, pure good fortune that I was able to have those opportunities. But yes, I did work on a Bond film. It might not be the one that everyone remembers. It's not, it's not one of the more recent ones, but I did do a James Bond film and I'm so proud of that. And I did Eyes Wide Shut, Kubrick's last film. I mean, for goodness sake, that is just fantastic, isn't it? I love that. But I'll be honest, the big name films aren't always the ones that you enjoy working on as much. I did Highlander 4, which went straight to DVD. But I learned so much on that. I had the best time. It was fantastic. The huge sound effects that we were creating, buildings collapsing and exploding, heads being chopped off. When do you get to do that in a normal day's work? Yeah, absolutely fantastic. But I also realised, because it is such a bizarre job and we do look ridiculous, as I mentioned before, sometimes it's important to just remind yourself that this is a silly job. It's a wonderful job and everything, but everyone can take themselves too seriously in any job, can't they? And sometimes you just have to go, I make sounds for a living. That's all right. And it just kind of takes the pressure off somehow.
And speaking of those projects, one of the ones that I really want to ask you about, because it's a favorite of mine, Killing Eve, and it's often mentioned as your favorite. What for you made that project stand out? Because I can imagine it's all the sounds. I don't know if what the listeners are going to be like, but it's all the sounds of the killings, obviously, which to me are always so visceral and intense. And I'm like, wow, like who put that together? And now I know you were a part of it. Yeah, it's incredible. Yeah. So, like, what for you was that probably your favorite part? I can imagine it was.
I mean, yes, having to make all those very, very outlandish, outrageous assassinations, having to make all of them sound real was hard, but brilliant. And we were very fortunate because the sound mixer really loves all of that detail and that really close-up, detailed Foley work. So Foley was really important to that project. And so we got to really experiment, I guess, and really get into the little details. And it was really good fun. It was really hard work, but it was really good fun. And what a program. I mean, it was so exciting. And I know my mum loved watching it and she could tell her friends, and that's always really nice. Sometimes it's actually nicer to work on a series than a film because more people will watch a series. That's quite cool.
And in that respect, one of the other series that I love that you worked on as well, brilliant. I feel like it's very much a return to force of like my time in London was basically watching a lot of the shows that you worked on. One of them being Bodyguard. And also I want to talk a little bit about Mamma Mia as well. Two incredibly different vibes and very like polar opposites. How does that kind of change your approach to how you work with sound? Because I can imagine the sounds of Bodyguard are very gritty, visceral, among other things. And Mamma Mia is very playful. So, like, does that also change the approach of the materials you use? Does that change the way that you kind of work with the sounds that you're making? Or is it all the same, but it's kind of like...
Yeah, that's a really good question. I mean, I suppose I can't quite remember when we did Mamma Mia, but it is quite a while ago. And even in the time between Mamma Mia and Bodyguard, there has been a shift in the way things are filmed and what is expected of Foley. But I mean, Mamma Mia was a feature film, so it's filmed in a very different way anyway. But what I loved about that, I mean, I love ABBA, come on. And we got to do... to do the dance numbers in the studio with headphones on, listening to the music. We got to wear the costumes, which we didn't need to, but we got to wear them, which was fun. You know, the roughly sequiny outfits.
Oh, yes. Costumes were fantastic in that movie.
Yeah. And I did Meryl Streep's footsteps. I mean, gosh, that's nice. Also seeing it before it had all the grading and everything, and seeing it in its raw state, as it were. And that's always fascinating, I think, to be able to see something before all the bells and whistles have been added. You know, you could see Meryl Streep clambering onto the top of the roof. Was it the roof of her hotel or something? And you could see the roof of Pinewood Studios where they'd been filming it. But in the cinema, you just see this beautiful vista with the sea and everything. But, you know, that's not... They didn't film it in Greece. And then Bodyguard, I just really... I loved the programme anyway. It's the sort of thing that I would watch. And everything was very... filmed much more close up. It was visceral is a word you used earlier, and it was visceral. Killing Eve and Bodyguard it was the same studio actually. And again, you just had to make it sound... Claustrophobic isn't quite the right word, but you want to draw the audience in. So the Foley is really tactile almost for the viewer as well as the artist, obviously. But yeah, to get all the detail and the when I can't remember exactly, but there's definitely a scene where they're getting shot at, and you're trying to, it is gritty, to use your word, and it is. You want to get the impact, you want to get the drama, you want to give, because it's not real. You know, again, the assassinations in Killing Eve, they're not real, they're special effects, so we have to make them sound real, and that's really challenging but really exciting as well, because you know that your work is important because there's nothing there otherwise.
And it's incredibly immersive. Yeah, actually, you speaking about that particular scene, the shootout, I think it is with the foreign secretary in the car.
That's
I was
right,
like, geez, it is so intense. And yeah, the sound just adds another layer. If the sound hadn't been delivering on that point, it wouldn't have felt anywhere near as tense or dramatic or intimate compared to, obviously just having the images showing on screen. And in that respect as well, I did really want to talk about one project, which totally fine if you don't want to cover this, because I know it's a bit of a weird one, but the Russian doll project. Like,
oh my God!
That how did you mentally prepare for that? Now, I had never seen it. I knew nothing of it. But as soon as I read your comments on it, I was like, I need to know more about this. How did you even work on that, Ruth? It sounds incredibly intense.
Oh my God. Now, where do I start, and how long have we got? That was one of the most bizarre fortnights. It was just 2 weeks that I did, but it was one of the most bizarre fortnights I've ever experienced, because they had created this studio in a massive building on Piccadilly. You went in, there was a reception, there were Russian guys there who were, I'm sure they were not KGB, but it felt like they were very strict and they didn't smile and they were very, you didn't want to mess with them, let's put it that way. And then you went upstairs and there were these corridors that were, they had displays of weird things and people and sort of mannequins. It was so peculiar. It was so peculiar. And then they'd set up a space for us to record Foley. And we were working on, I think I worked on 2 sections of the film. And one of them was so appalling that we actually, I don't have, as a Foley artist, you have very little power, shall we say, in these situations. But the recordist I was working with just said, we can't work on this. This is not right. So yeah, the project itself, it was so strange because it was meant to be, it was all real, wasn't it, supposedly?
Yeah, and that was the thing. Reading more and more about it, the fact that it was meant to be a feature film, then turned into 12 films, and then became an almost live-in experience that was filmed as a feature. This reading about it itself, I just was intrigued to kind of know the first-hand experience. So in the end, your team actually decided to pull out because of the fact that the project itself was too intense, I would say, and probably too much. Really?
Yeah, it was just that particular section we refused to do, which involved pigs being killed in a pretty gruesome fashion, which is probably what happens all over the place to put food on the table, but it was really grim. And there was another scene which I won't describe now. But there were so many hours and hours and hours of this film that it didn't matter really that we didn't do that. We just did another hour of a film, But one of the sections we did, they had, I think if I remember rightly, they had filmed these 2 actors as though they were a couple, but it was all sort of Big Brother style cameras, but it was set in the past as well. And they were actors, but they were living there. And they were just living in this apartment and having these weird arguments and stuff. And I don't know, none of it was scripted. So
I think that was the thing that confused me. I was like, I think it was, I read notes from people saying that the director went so hard that basically everyone who turned up on set had to be in character at all times. No costumes, no products or anything that were not from that era were allowed on set. And if so, they were told to leave and then come back when they had, down to even things like the brand of cigarettes they were smoking had to be from that era. Do you still think to date that's probably the weirdest project you've ever been involved with?
Oh, I'd say absolutely. It's so weird that I've actually blanked it from my mind. I've spoken to other people since who worked on it, and some people managed to, not Foley artists, editors, and they managed to last a few weeks at a time or even months. But I'm glad I only did 2 weeks, and I'm also really glad I did it because I could talk about it a little bit. But I think it won awards. I think, it's one of these, a little bit Emperor's New Clothes, it was so arty in a way, or it could get away with being perceived to be so arty that, it was, it did win awards, but I don't know. Very, very strange, that one.
I'm sure I'm probably going to have to ask you more about it off air, just purely because the rabbit hole I went down was something else. And I just couldn't imagine the experience of working on it.
This podcast is powered by Wizz FX. We make brands sound sick. Music, radio, podcasts, sonic branding. If your audio needs to hit harder and stick longer, Wizz FX has you covered. Learn more at wizzfx.com.
Now, kind of going a little bit more into the kind of the nuts and bolts of being a Foley artist as well, and kind of the working environment, like how closely do Foley artists work with sound editors and directors as well when building this sound world? Because the immediate assumption for most people is that a sound editor or a soundie would be working in Foley, not necessarily a Foley artist would be a separate thing. But how closely do you guys work together? And is the director in the same room as you guys when you're making these sounds?
Generally speaking, we're kept out of sight, out of mind. So it will be just me with an engineer, possibly with an editor. Oh, that's nowadays. In the past, there would be the recordist, the Foley editor, who would have sheets of charts all mapped out where the sounds should go and which track it should be on. You'd often get their assistant in the room. There'd be a studio assistant. There'd be 2 Foley artists. The sound, what did they call them? They didn't call them supervising sound editors then, but the equivalent of would sometimes come in. And occasionally you'd get the director coming in or a producer. But we're very much left on our own these days. For bigger feature films, you might get somebody coming in. But the directors, they don't tend to get involved in that stage of the post-production. Perhaps they've gone on to something else by then. When I've done projects in Lisbon, I used to go there quite a lot. You would always have the director in the room. And that was mostly a really good thing, and you could really understand what they wanted. But of course, sometimes it wouldn't be a good thing because they wouldn't understand the process of Foley and what something would sound like after it had been edited and mixed and everything. So it was tricky sometimes, and perhaps I wasn't as diplomatic as I ought to have been on certain occasions, but it would be nice actually if editors and directors came into the studio a bit more often, I think. Because I think often we notice things about the edit as well that perhaps people haven't picked up before. And it's really nice if you can get a bit of guidance as to what the feel of something is. We can gauge it from what we're seeing, but it's nice to get some notes. It's nice to get some feedback.
Especially in situations where maybe you're creating a sound that doesn't exist. For example, like your work on War of the Worlds, where you're having to create a sound that is not even tangible. You're making a sound that doesn't exist. So how is it that you then get that sound yourself? Or is it the director sometimes that is coming and being like, this is what I imagine an alien life form coming to Earth sounds like when it's shooting a laser? Is that kind of like something that's given to you as a pointer, or is it more like they come to you and say, we want to know what you imagine this would sound like?
Yeah, gosh. Sometimes we do get quite specific instructions, very, very occasionally. But then when I say specific instructions, they may start off as being specific instructions from what the director is saying, but we have to then interpret that and make it into sound. So, and sometimes you're also asked to make a sound for something that doesn't exist yet because they haven't actually done the visual effects. That's also a little bit tricky. But with the War of the Worlds, I remember the weird spiky legs that we had to do. And I don't know whether we had feedback or I can't quite remember how we did it all. But of course, if you're working and if you get on well with the engineer, then you start trying things out. And between you can tell if something's working or not. And that's another part of the process that's really majorly important, is that relationship between the artist and the engineer. If you don't get on, or if you can't think along the same lines, then it's really hard to create anything, actually. Because you need to bounce ideas off each other and you need to get excited about these weird sounds that you're making. I guess sometimes we also the next stage down is the sound mixer. And if they have a really clear idea of what they're wanting to achieve, then they might give us some useful information or guidance. And hopefully then we can understand what they're saying.
And do you feel Foley is finally getting more recognition in the industry, especially in a lot of these modern TV dramas that rely a lot more heavily on sound design to kind of build out these worlds? Do you feel like we are getting to that point now? Because one thing I did find interesting, and this is more related to the industry as a whole, was the fact that I remember looking through your IMDb and seeing that you're largely uncredited with a lot of the work, even though your work is very much ingrained in a lot of these projects. Do you feel like that's slowly changing, that Foley artists are getting credited now for the work that they're doing and the part that they play in the overall development of sound?
I think, generally speaking, it's like a graph. There's a line that goes up in terms of recognition, and people are getting credited more. You can actually see Foley artist credits on a Netflix program nowadays, sometimes, if you're lucky. But I would also say there's a line that's going down, which is that the appreciation of what Foley can offer is on a downward scale, and that really concerns me. And it's quite upsetting, actually, because what we do is so bespoke. It's so tailored to a project. You can't get that from a library track. We will give that detail that you can't find elsewhere. And I think that it's a little tricky to explain, and I don't want to step on anybody's toes, but I think it's a real shame that sometimes the freelancers are being pushed aside in favour of using assistants and interns, and it's cheaper, and I understand that, but it's not. It's really sad and quite depressing as well, and also. Excuse me, because it's easy to send things off over the internet, you can get a lot of people sending their Foley and their post-production to cheaper studios overseas, which is very dispiriting.
Especially when you've trained for years and your expertise and you understand obviously how it comes together. So having it kind of cheapened in a way makes it seem like, I can completely understand that. I think it's one of those things where I think especially in a lot of industries now, they're just trying to look at bodies and basically throwing bodies at work rather than finding expertise, which isn't necessarily the way to go, especially when, people have made a career out of making themselves professionals in this industry. And in that respect, I think it's interesting because do you think that there is almost a misunderstanding of the profession itself, and that's why a lot more studios are now kind of maybe looking at getting cheap interns or just offshooting it or using sound libraries? Do you think it's just the misunderstanding of how important it is?
I do, and I think that's really it's really damning, actually, and I think it's such a shame because I think in the UK, if I'm being honest, I think I know that there are a lot of post-production houses that have just recently gone under, and we're going to lose a really valuable part of our film industry if we don't support the people in post-production who really know what they're doing as well. And the film industry in the UK should be really valuable. It has been, and it should continue to be. But if we keep going for the cheaper option all the time, then we're really going to lose a really major body of talent. And actually, I think it cheapens the industry as a whole as well, actually.
And in that respect as well, I think it's good that you almost moved into the other areas as well. You didn't just kind of remain just in film and television. We've spoken before about the fact that you moved into theatre. And what was it like then? Because this all happened in around 2010. You began combining Foley with live theatre performance. For you, did that kind of unlock a new kind of, not only a new avenue for you to explore this profession, but also opened a new door for you creatively because you had a lot more to choose from or a lot more that you could work from?
It's definitely opened doors creatively, because I've always done theatre on the side, as it were. So doing theatre professionally with the Foley is fabulous for me. It really is. But of course, you spend 2 months out of the country and you're not available for work in the UK, and you sort of fall down a very short list of available Foley artists, but you then might be the last person to get called for a job. But I mean, I feel incredibly lucky that I've been able to mix the studio work and the theatre work. There's nothing like it, really. And I think the two things inform each other. So I've learned a lot doing live stuff, which I bring to the studio work, and vice versa. Yeah. But I don't know. Things, I'll be absolutely honest, the Foley world over here feels a little bit uncertain at the moment. So, yeah, we'll just have to see how things go.
And do you think the industry is getting stronger in other areas, or do you feel it's a little bit more stable? Like, for example, the US, I know they're a powerhouse for productions and things like that. Do you still see that there is strength in the industry over there compared to maybe the UK?
Yeah, I think the American studios really respect their Foley artists. And then I think that the film production companies, I think Foley is really well respected over there. That's the impression I'm getting, which is, yeah, fantastic for them. Brilliant. Let's hope that I don't know who's in control. That's the thing. It's easy to say they, but I hope that the bosses over here, kind of take a leaf out of their book and start investing in post-production and Foley here again as well. And it is happening. I do, you hear of one studio closing, but then they're trying to resurrect the old Foley Theatre at Shepperton now, which is, I mean, it should never have been disused, but at least they didn't knock it down. They didn't turn it into another type of studio. It is a Foley theatre, and they're building that back up now, which is really exciting. So, there is hope. But we need a little bit more proactive support and investment, I think, in our little bit of the industry.
And in that respect, is there investment from the case of basically people wanting to get into the industry? I know largely for a lot of people that can also be a way of maintaining strength in industry is by seeing up-and-coming other artists getting involved. Are you seeing that yourself? Are you seeing like the same faces kind of making themselves known from the younger sort of generations, like coming straight out of university? Or is it still kind of like an ad hoc thing where have you got people hitting you up, Ruth, saying, hey, can I join you on set and see what you do?
I mean, there's always people contacting me asking if they can shadow me. But the thing is that when I started, you always worked as a pair. So there could be somebody who was more junior who could learn on the job. Excuse me. But nowadays we don't have that. So yes, you can come and have a look at me working, but I can't teach you because we don't have the support system in place for that. There's no opportunity to really teach new people, and that is a problem. I absolutely accept that that's a problem. But if I were based in a studio and wasn't freelance, that might be different. But then the studio itself would probably pay for that kind of training. But also, if I train somebody up, then they might get the work and I won't. It's like,
no, that's
oh God, because there really aren't very many of us. We're very, very few, us freelancers.
And Ruth, if you were going to discuss anyone who has been like a big mentor to you or someone that you've really looked up to in the industry of Foley, who would you say is probably one of the artists that you've really kept close in touch with or have always admired their work?
Oh gosh, well, I mean, the two women who trained me were Pauline Griffiths and Jenny Lee Wright. So obviously I owe a huge amount to them. But I made one of my best friends from working with the agency, Paula. So we've worked together, and but so rarely now, unfortunately, because we don't work in pairs. But every so often we're put on a job together, and it's so alarming actually how similar some of our actions are, just the way we hold our cloth when we do clothes moves or something. And we have such a great time as well. And that's, it's lovely working with another artist. But yes, we all know each other, and you learn different things from different people on every single job, actually. But that's what I've always felt is so rich and rewarding, being a freelancer, is that you have to adapt to every different studio and the challenges that those studios present, and working on with different people and things. I prefer freelance work. I feel as though if I were in one place, I would get stuck in a system, stuck in my own system of working. And I really like that I get challenged by all these different people. So I'm not going to mention everybody's names, but yeah, we all have our strengths, and we all learn from each other, I think, which is really nice.
And you spoke about the fact that you kind of like the idea of challenge. Is there a challenge that you're yet to undertake that you would like to in the Foley world? Is there a project or a type of project you'd like to work on that you've been yet to try out? Or do you feel like you've kind of done it all now? You're quite adept. You've done the whole scope. Well, from Peppa Pig to War of the Worlds to theatre shows. Like, what is there anything that you haven't done yet, Ruth, that you'd love to dip into?
Well, I'm never going to get the chance, but I would have loved to have done a Mission Impossible. Oh well. And I would love to do a current James Bond.
Good call.
Yeah, that would be amazing. I mean, I love action films. Are so much fun to do. They really, really are. I never did a Harry Potter film, but there's a new series being made. Sign me up now. Oh my God, I would absolutely love to work on a Harry Potter. And again, projects like that, it's not just the name, is it? But it's what you have to do in the project itself, the magic, literally the magic that you have to create, because there's so much in terms of special effects. So Foley is really important, and you're making things up and making things sound real that aren't. Yeah, anything like that.
Because everyone talks about the visual. Yeah, because everyone talks about the visual world building, but not the audio world building that's needed as well. And was there ever a thought of you dipping into audio dramas at all? One of the dramas that I've really always loved following was the Doctor Who audio drama that's existed. And funnily enough, I worked at the studio that used to record a lot of the ADR and obviously the recordings for that. Is that ever something that you've looked at getting into, audio dramas and doing Foley for that?
Well, actually, and I think I'm allowed to say it now, but I did a small amount of work on the Harry Potter audiobooks, the current new Audible release. Yeah, I'd forgotten I did that. I did one of the Doctor Who TV Christmas specials a couple of years ago, and that was a real dream come true, because that was really cool. I really enjoyed doing that. But yeah, audiobooks, I think there is a new sort of wave of interest in adding Foley to audiobooks. So yeah, I'd definitely be up for doing that. I mean, the Harry Potter bit, the little bit that I did was tough. I'm not going to lie. It was quite hard because we didn't have the finished voice recordings. So we were sort of making up what we were doing and not really knowing. Yeah, that was tricky, and much more so for the recordists and the company that was running that. But I understand they sound great now, so that's good. But yeah.
I love that, Ruth. I think that's a really interesting thing, because you're getting thrown these challenges all the time. And I can't imagine, because you probably would have been reading a script being like, okay, is this sound meant to be out of anger? Is this joy? Is this what? Like, how is this meant to... Yeah, and these are the things that probably many people don't consider when it comes to the life of a Foley artist, the work that's involved. There's so much context that's almost also needed for you in order to create these like really incredible sounds. And the final question I have for you, Ruth, is looking back at your career, as crazy and strange as it is, and probably even harder to describe, is when you told your parents what you did they understand it all, or were they just like, Ruth, what are you doing? Are you just playing around at this point? How hard was it for you to describe your job to your parents?
Oh gosh. I can't remember, actually. I think they were probably just relieved I was doing anything at the time. But I've slightly refined. I mean, I've had to explain what Foley is a million times over the last several years, and I still don't think I've quite got it right. But I'm getting there. But yeah, how did I tell Mum and Dad? I can't remember. And what was very exciting when I first started is that I thought I was going to work on the film of Evita, and Evita was a real soundtrack to my childhood. So that I was absolutely made up, and then my week on that got cancelled, which was really disappointing. But yeah, it's quite cool. I guess it was quite cool at the time when I could ring Mum and Dad up and say, "Look, I'm going to be working on this film," but then I didn't. So. Oh well, the balloon was popped. The bubble burst.
Thanks for listening to this episode of the Beyond Broadcast podcast, proudly sponsored by Wizz FX, specialists in audio branding. If you enjoyed the show, give a 5-star review on your preferred podcast platform. You can connect with the show on Instagram at Beyond Broadcast Pod and subscribe for updates on new episodes.